What's up, guys? Theo here, doing a prediction for the UFC 298 main event, Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria. So right now, Alexander Volkanovski is a minus 120 favorite, and the comeback on Ilia is plus 100 on DraftKings. Man, this is an awesome fight, guys. I've been waiting to see Ilia fight for a championship for a really long time. I've always kind of liked him. Ever since the Yusuf Zalal fight, which is where I kind of first became aware of him, and that was the first time I tried to bet on him. I've really liked him and what he does in the octagon. I bet on him in that fight, and, he won. I made money on him, and I've liked him ever since. I thought he's really good. He's got a great look for MMA and whatnot. Great potential to be a star, but I do kind of like Alexander Volkanovski here, guys, and this is a fight I've really gone back and forth on. There's times I was very convinced Alexander would win. There was times I was very convinced Ilia would win. And when it comes down to the grindstone, even though I do think Ilia probably has the best shot of becoming champ of any of Alexander Volkanovski's contenders that he's defeated, I think he's got the best shot. I think it's Ilia. I never thought Max Holloway was going to be Alexander. I never thought Brian Ortega was going to be Alexander. I never thought Yair was going to beat Alexander. I never thought Korean Zombie was going to beat him. This was the first time that I was really like, man, this is a guy that could take this from Volkanovski. But when I sit back and I kind of look at them both and I think about their strengths and their weaknesses, you kind of just have to pick Volkanovski because he's a little bit better skill for skill in a lot of places. And I wouldn't necessarily say that Ilia is not a very high-skilled martial artist and isn't champion quality. I think that he is. And, he could win this. And at plus money, I think Ilia Topuria is a pretty good fighter to bet on. But the thing about Ilia is that he's capable of being counter-wrestled. He's capable of being backed up on the feet, right? He's capable of being hurt. We've kind of seen all of this happen in Ilia Topuria's fights. Even fights that he wins, like the Jai Herbert fight, which he came back in, he got head kicked and wobbled very, very badly. And came back and managed to knock Jai Herbert out. Extremely impressive comeback from him. But the issue is that that's not the first time we've seen Ilia really rocked with the head kick. It also happened on the regional scene before he got to the UFC. And he did get backed up in that fight with Bryce Mitchell. People remember the fight with Bryce Mitchell as this extremely dominant victory for Ilia Topuria. But, he encountered resistance in that fight. He was controlled on the ground for a little bit by Mitchell. Mitchell managed to reverse some of his takedowns. And Mitchell did have him on the back foot, on the feet at one point. There were moments that Bryce Mitchell was winning that fight. And so ultimately, when you kind of take in all of Ilia's fights, what you see is a guy that is very, very skilled, and he's very aggressive and very physical, and he uses that aggressive, physical championship mentality to overcome some of the weaknesses that he does have in his very well-rounded game. And I just don't think you can afford to basically be down against Alexander Volkanovski. I don't think you can afford to let him win moments against you, get rocked, get put on the back foot, get taken down, because Volkanovski has been showing pretty great wrestling in his last few fights, and great transitions, great in the clinch. He's just been looking good everywhere. He looks good on the ground. He looks good on the feet. As always, everyone knows Volkanovski's incredible on the feet. And even though Ilia is also really good on the feet, and he's got his own good jiu-jitsu, he's a very high-level jiu-jitsu guy, and, he's very measured with everything he does. Like I said, he has been known to be reversed. He's been known to be backed up on the feet. So we know that people that are less skilled than Alexander Volkanovski can give Ilia trouble. And the only guy that we've seen give Volkanovski any trouble is Islam Makhachev. So I'm not saying that Ilia can't win here. He has the skills to win. It's that, can he show up and be better on the night than Volkanovski? And I'm just not sure that he really can, because we've seen him get compromised at times. And we've seen Volkanovski just be pretty consistently perfect everywhere. And Volkanovski is not like old or washed or anything like that. I don't buy into that narrative. So again, like I said, I always say, I never try to time a fighter's fall off, an older fighter's fall off. Volk's not that old. He's not past his prime yet, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can tell. Him getting knocked out by Islam Makhachev, that doesn't really mean much to me on the short notice, and the fact that Islam is so much bigger than him, and the first fight was a bit of a miracle that he was able to do so well anyway. So I just kind of prefer Volkanovski in that regard of like, who is going to show up better on the night. Well, we know both of them are really going to show up for this, but I think Volkanovski is going to show up in slightly better form. He is the guy who's been here before, done this before. And the thing about Ilia, man, is like, people are making all these Conor McGregor comparisons. I see it all over social media. But really, you know, everyone's talking about like the power of manifestation, and I love, you know, Ilia is manifesting this, and everyone is really into the confidence when they see it from a guy like Ilia, because he can back it up, right? But guys, I've never really been a big believer in manifesting. I believe there are energies in the world, and I believe there's like energies you can tap into and utilize and use for, you know, your own purposes. But I do not believe that just like pretending like you're the champion already, saying it, putting it in your Instagram, it's all a bit plain for me, to be honest. I think back to what, you know, there's a famous quote by Mike Tyson's coach, Cus D'Amato, and he talks about how when two incredibly skilled fighters meet, the one with more character is the one that will win. And you can kind of interpret that in a number of ways when you look at this matchup, right? Do you think that Ilia Topuria has more character because he has more self-belief, almost a delusional level of self-belief? Or do you believe that Volk has more character? Is character to you, is it being humble? Is it being a dude that's willing to put in the work and being proud of the fact that he's a hard worker and that he, you know, comes from humble beginnings, and he's just a dog willing to take on any challenge and not back down at all? What do you think the better character is? For my money, I prefer the dude that's just a little more hardcore and a little more proven in Volkanovski. And I kind of trust a guy that is just willing to do whatever it takes every single time. That's what we've seen from Volkanovski. And look, I think Ilia wants this really, really badly, maybe more than any. I think he probably wants to be champion more than any other fighter in the UFC right now that is not a champion. I believe that. But again, I don't believe that just pretending like you're the champ, grabbing the belt, doing all the little McGregor things, I don't believe that you can just make something into being by thinking it and believing it really strongly. I believe that if you can figure out where your advantages lie and you can completely efficiently utilize your advantages, I think you're capable of a lot of things, right? I think people are capable of more than they know. But I'm not convinced of that because one dude is just like incredibly confident that he is going to win. Even though, you know, there is kind of a smell of an upset in the air on this one. I believe in establishment more than I believe in the power of confidence, right? One of my kind of big philosophies regarding MMA and how I look at breaking down fights, and really just anything, wealth, fame, anything, it's all about establishment, right? It's all about who is more established and more cut out for this and what's being done. And in this case, it seems like it's Volkanovski, right? It seems like it's the dude who has that champion pedigree. Even though Ilia is kind of on fire right now and he's been looking great everywhere. And I see a lot of people making great arguments for Ilia Topuria here. Namely, I think Lucrative MMA, who I think is the best MMA bettor right now, is really, really high on Ilia and thinks Ilia is going to knock Volkanovski out. I think it's possible, and I do study tape a lot. And I studied a lot of tape when Lucrative said that, trying to figure out what is it that he's seeing, that he thinks that Ilia is just going to knock Volkanovski out early. Because, you know, Ilia says he's going to knock every single opponent out in the first round, and he doesn't always do that. He usually doesn't. But he says that about every single fight. But I think what Lucrative is seeing is the high, tight boxing of Topuria. And that's something that Volkanovski, he hasn't really faced anybody that wants to come forward at him really explosive like that. He hasn't faced anyone like that in a while. He has faced fighters like that, but not anyone that is just prime and on fire the way that Ilia is, right? So he faced like a Chad Mendez. I believe that he fought Josh Emmett. I heard somebody say that, but I can't verify that off the top of my head. I don't have Topology pulled up. But he's fought smaller, explosive boxers before. Not someone with the really technical inside boxing, slick hands that Ilia has. So I think that's why you hear someone like Lucrative, who's an extremely great bettor and he has great reads, thinks that Ilia is going to knock Volk out here. I totally get that. I kind of see what he's saying, and I see where he sees the opening, because Volk does tend to circle, keep his hands a little bit low. But, you know, Ilia does not respond super well to when people pressure him. I know that's kind of crazy that I'm saying that, because he is so good in the pocket and he's so aggressive and offensive. But we've seen him backed up by fighters plenty of times. He's just not usually the guy going backwards, because he is so game and he just wants to throw down that he's usually going to get in on you first and bring the fight to you. He wants you against the cage. He wants to tee off on you. But Volkanovski does as well, guys. And we have to remember that Volkanovski dropped Islam Makhachev in the first fight between those two. So this guy has the power, the skill, and the speed to drop absolutely anyone and box with anybody. And even though Ilia probably has slightly more technical inside boxing, and maybe it could be a bad matchup for Volkanovski in that regard, I don't think it's a great matchup for Ilia anywhere else. I think, you know, when you watch what Ilia is doing to people, namely like Josh Emmett, where he completely dominated that fight and was just in control the whole time, the thing about it is that Josh Emmett wasn't reacting the way that Volkanovski reacts. He wasn't moving like Volkanovski moves. He wasn't as quick. He wasn't as dangerous with the combinations. He wasn't throwing as many feints. Ilia looked really great against Emmett and managed to win that decision. But I don't see him looking that good against Volkanovski. So I don't think he's going to finish Volkanovski here. I don't think Volkanovski's going to finish him. I think we're about to see a complete war. I think this is going to go to decision. And I think Volkanovski is going to get that decision. I do think the UFC really wants Ilia to win here. I think that's pretty obvious. If you look at some of their marketing and how they've been advertising him, you can kind of tell when the UFC wants somebody to be champion. I felt like you could tell that they wanted Dricus to be champion really badly. So, you know, if this is a really close fight and this ends up being a split and goes to decision, Topuria could give the decision to Topuria, because the UFC brass and the marketing machine, they want Topuria to be champion. There's no doubt about that. That's an absolute for sure statement. Not saying they don't like Volk, but, you know, money and fame and popularity doesn't lie, and it's something that people will spend any price for. So the UFC definitely, they want to see Ilia get his hand raised, but I just think Volkanovski is going to do enough and outclass him here. I think he's going to make a statement by wrestling him, showing that Ilia's jiu-jitsu isn't going to be enough, and I think he's going to bring it to Ilia on the feet. I don't think he's going to be like gun shy because of what happened with Islam. I really don't. Yeah, this is one of the tougher picks that I've had to do because I really love both of these guys, and I kind of don't want to see either of them lose. Especially would hate to see Volkanovski lose because I feel like people will definitely write him off if he does. But I've made a lot of money betting on Volkanovski against contenders. You know, that's how I've done very well betting on UFC in the past, is betting on champions fighting contenders that everyone thinks is going to beat them. And then it usually doesn't go that way. You know, back to what I'm saying about establishment, we don't really see changing of the guard at the championship level very often in the UFC. It's quite rare, actually. You know, I mean, it's like almost every time a champion defends his or her belt, you've got it seems like the contender's almost always a very popular pick. But you got to think, how many different champions has the featherweight weight class had? 4. So, you know, it really, seeing a changing of the guard like that is one of the rarer things in MMA. And, you know, it can happen. Some guy can just come in on fire like Ilia and just make things happen. But the reality is, I think we have to err on the side of the establishment here. And the establishment is Volkanovski in this weight class. He's beaten everybody. He's looked the absolute best. So, guys, give me Alexander Volkanovski minus 120. Not going to bet him or Ilia in this spot because I really don't want money on this fight. I just want to watch it. I think it's going to be a delight. Keep it locked in, guys. Can't wait for Saturday.